What's the secret behind mummification? Hello and welcome all, hope you're all doing well. The Pharaohs are regarded as an important historical cultural icon in human history. The reason for this is due to their unrivaled superiority in many areas, especially architecture and construction, as they left huge pyramids and obelisks as evidence of their ability. They also excelled in astrology, mathematics, and a variety of other sciences at the time. The ancient Egyptians had superiority in chemistry and medicine. Particularly, their practice of mummification drew the most attention from scientists and the general public, which is a complicated medical procedure made famous by the ancient Egyptians. As a result, they were able to keep mummified bodies for thousands of years. It is worth noting that the Pharaohs' mummification process is still shrouded in mystery and controversy. So we ask the question, is the mummification process a closely guarded secret, like the pyramids and many other things associated with the Pharaohs? Or do scientists and researchers know the specifics of the process? Most importantly, why did the Pharaohs mummify kings and queens? Can we in this day and age perform the mummification process as the Pharaohs did? Hello and welcome. In this episode of Midnight Questions, I'm Steve, and today we'll be answering the question, what is the secret behind mummification? However, before we begin, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell button to receive all of our new videos. The ancient Egyptians believed in the existence of life in the afterlife, and that death is not the end of the human life, but rather the beginning of a new one. However, it is worth noting that the way they perceived the other world was a little bit unusual. The Pharaohs believed that to travel to the other world, certain conditions had to be met. One of the most important of these conditions is that the body and form remain the same as they were when a person was alive, making it easy to recognize their facial features when they tried to go to the afterlife. Furthermore, the tomb should be outfitted with everything they might require in the next world. Thus, if these conditions are met, one will be able to revive in the same form using the tools and objects buried with him. These conditions must be met to live in the other world. As a result, the ancient Egyptians relied on embalming or mummification, which is a medical process carried out by priests and specialists to preserve the bodies of some kings and wealthy people from decomposition or rotting. Astonishingly, they have been able to do this, as they have mummified bodies that have lasted for thousands of years. Let me ask you a question before we continue with our topic. Is the mummification process used by the Pharaohs a closely guarded secret? Of course, the answer is no. Scientists and researchers understand how the ancient Egyptians performed the mummification process, and all that is required is the provision of special materials and tools, as well as the knowledge of steps required to complete the successful mummification process. This is why we'll need knives and hooks, as well as oil, wax, honey, resin, and wrappings. This is in addition to wood, incense, natural perfumes, palm oil, and natural herbs, and some vessels made of limestone or calcite. Finally, very large amounts of natron salt. After gathering all of these items, one will be ready to begin the mummification process. What should be understood first is that the material that we mentioned above is divided into two parts. The first is essential and the second is secondary, like incense and perfume, while the main element of the embalming process is natron salt. It is the main ingredient used by the Pharaohs for embalming, since it is considered as an antiseptic and a preservative at the same time. That's why natron, also known as native soda, was a very important product in ancient history. It was a natural compound of sodium salts. It was made in Egypt, the Middle East, and Greece. Natron has been used in medicine, cooking, agriculture, glass making, and the dehydration of Egyptian mummies. Aside from knowing the correct rituals and prayers to be performed at various stages, priests also needed a thorough understanding of human anatomy. The first step in the process was to remove any internal parts that could quickly decay. The brain was carefully removed by inserting special hooked instruments up through the nostrils and pulling out bits of brain tissue. The organs of the abdomen and chest were then removed by embalmers through a cut made on the left-hand side of the abdomen. They only left the heart in place, believing it was the centre of the person's being and intelligence. The stomach, liver, lungs and intestines were preserved separately in a special box or jars known today as canopic jars. These were buried alongside the mummy. Organs were treated, wrapped and placed within the body in later mummies. Even so, unused canopic jars were still used in the burial ritual. The strange thing is that the Pharaohs used to leave the heart in the middle of the corpse and concentrate on preserving it, never extracting it. because it was extremely important to them and they regarded it as the seat of passion and soul. After removing all the contents of the abdomen, the embalmers would clean the body's internal cavity. As a result, the body is prepared for the second stage of embalming, which heavily relies on salt. Salts in general have a strong ability to combat putrefaction and bacteria, particularly natron salt. The alkaline salts in natron salt made it a formidable opponent of bacteria and enzymes. After completing the steps that we mentioned earlier, the embalmers covered the entire body with a large amount of natron salt, and they left the carcass in the salt for about 35 days in order for the outer skin to acquire strong immunity against bacteria and enzymes and to maintain its shape for the longest possible period of thousands of years. But it is worth noting that after this stage the body becomes solid and completely devoid of moisture and liquids. Next, the wrapping process begins. Hundreds of yards of linen were required for each mummy. The priests wrapped long strips of linen around the body with care. Amulets were placed among the wrappings to protect the dead from mishaps, and prayers and magical words were written on some of the linen strips. Between the layers of head bandages, the priests would frequently place a mask of the person's face. The form was coated with resin at several stages before the wrapping resumed. Finally, the priests would secure the final cloth or shroud in place with linen strips. Although the tomb preparation had usually begun long before the person's death, there was no deadline and craftsmen, workers and artists had to work quickly. There was a lot of stuff to put in the tomb that the person would need in the afterlife. Furniture and statuettes were prepared. Wall paintings of religious or daily scenes were completed, and food or prayer lists were also completed. When needed in the afterlife, these models, pictures and lists will become real through a magical process. Everything had been prepared for the funeral. Anyway, after the mummification and tomb preparation were completed, the priests guarded the tomb with incantations and ensured that it tightly sealed to keep tomb thieves and others from tampering with the tomb of the king, queen or other person of high social status who had been buried there. It is also rumoured that the ancient Egyptians used toxic substances to protect the tomb and the mummy inside the coffin. It is worth noting that the mummy is not a complete corpse as we mentioned earlier, especially after extracting the stomach and liver and many other things during the stages of the embalming process. But this does not mean what the ancient pharaohs did was simple. Actually, it was amazing, impressive and of course very elaborate. Especially because scientists recently managed to obtain DNA from some mummies. They also managed to do numerous autopsies. Through this they learned things like the reason behind the death of the mummified corpse, what he or she used to eat, and the age at which he or she passed away. Scientists were also able, by relying on mummies, to learn a lot of information about the way of life of the ancient Egyptian people. They also discovered that the ancient Egyptians suffered from many chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, tuberculosis, and other diseases. In other words, bearing in mind that scientists have known many mummies, this indicates that they have excelled in the field of chemistry and medicine. And that's it. If you have watched it all the way up to here, press the like and share so we can see how much of you have watched the video all the way until the end. And if you have a question in the middle of the night that is causing you confusion, please leave it in the comments section so we can answer it for you. Because we make the most of our videos based on the questions that you write in the comments section. Bye.